The massive crystalline structure floated in the void between galaxies, its surface rippling with colors that had no names in any known language. Commander Zuravex of the Galactic Coalition survey vessel, Starweaver, stared at the readings on her console, unable to believe what she was seeing. The structure was impossibly old, predating every known civilization in the galaxy by at least 10 million years. Energy readings are off the charts, her science officer, a six-armed Trellin named Korvax, reported. His usually steady voice trembled with excitement. Whatever this thing is, it's been actively powered for longer than our entire species has existed. Zara leaned forward in her command chair, her purple skin tingling with anticipation. The Coalition had been exploring the edges of known space for centuries, but they had never found anything like this. The structure was perfectly spherical, roughly the size of a small moon, and covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "Can we get closer?" she asked her pilot, a young Meridian whose bioluminescent patches flickered nervously. "The gravitational fields around it are strange," the pilot replied. "It's like space itself has been folded and refolded 1,000 times. But I think I can navigate us through." As the Starweaver approached, more details became visible. The surface wasn't solid at all, but made up of billions of tiny hexagonal panels, each one covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Some of the crew reported headaches. Others claimed they could hear whispers in languages they didn't understand. "Wait!" Korvax suddenly exclaimed, all six of his arms freezing over his instruments. "I'm detecting something inside. It's a star system. An entire star system contained within this structure." Zara felt her heart skip a beat. "Both of them? That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would be—" "Commander!" the communications officer interrupted. "The structure is transmitting. It's in every language simultaneously." "How is that possible?" "Put it through the speakers," Zara ordered. The bridge filled with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was ancient, tired, and filled with a sadness so profound that several crew members began to weep without knowing why. "Warning," the voice said. "This boundary was erected for the protection of all sentient life. The species contained within voluntarily accepted isolation to prevent catastrophic contamination of the greater galaxy. Do not attempt to breach the seal. Do not attempt to make contact. Do not." The message cut off abruptly. In its place came a sound that made everyone on the bridge cover their ears. It was like a billion voices crying out in unison, a cacophony of rage and sorrow and something else, something hungry. "Sir," Korvax whispered, his instruments showing readings that made no sense. "Something inside knows we're here, and it wants out." The hexagonal panels on the structure's surface began to pulse with a sickly green light. One by one, they started to fail, tiny cracks appearing in the perfect surface. Whatever was inside had been waiting for so long, and now, finally, someone had come close enough to hear its call. Zara made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Send a priority message to Coalition Command. Tell them we found something. Tell them." She paused, watching as more panels began to fail. "Tell them we may have just made the biggest mistake in the history of the galaxy." Inside the structure, in a star system that had been hidden from the universe for millions of years, something stirred. Earth, the planet that had been sealed away, began to wake up, and with it came the secret that had been buried for so long, a secret that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten, but one that had never forgotten them. The humans were coming back, but they were no longer the species that had been locked away. Isolation had changed them, evolved them, transformed them into something that defied understanding. They had spent eons preparing, planning, becoming something more than they had been. The seal hadn't been a prison. It had been a cocoon, and now it was time to emerge. On the bridge of the Starweaver, alarms began to sound. The cracks in the structure were spreading faster now, and through them came a light that wasn't quite light, a sound that wasn't quite sound. Reality itself seemed to bend and warp around the failing seal. "Should we run?" the pilot asked, his bioluminescent patches now flashing in rapid, panic patterns. Zara shook her head slowly. It's too late for that. Whatever happens next, we're witnesses to it. Send everything we're seeing back to command. Continuous feed. If we don't make it out of here, at least they'll know what happened. The first panel shattered completely, and through the gap came something that made the entire crew gasp. It was a ship, but unlike anything in the Coalition's vast databases. It seemed to be made of living metal that flowed and shifted like water. It had no visible engines, no weapons ports, no anything that marked it as a vessel of war or peace. It simply was, and it was scanning them. Zara could feel the scan like fingers probing at her mind, gentle but insistent. It wasn't painful, but it was deeply unsettling. Whatever intelligence was behind that probe was vast, ancient, and utterly alien despite having originated from the same evolutionary tree as many Coalition species. "Commander," the communications officer said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's trying to talk to us. But the language, it's like nothing I've ever encountered. It's not just words, it's concepts. Pure concepts being pushed directly into our minds." Zara nodded. She could feel it too. Images, emotions, memories that weren't her own flooding through her consciousness. She saw a blue and green world, beautiful and vibrant. She saw cities that touched the clouds, ships that sailed between stars, a species full of hope and dreams and ambition. And then she saw the plague. It hadn't been a disease in any conventional sense. It had been an idea, a concept that spread from mind to mind faster than light. Those infected by it didn't die, they changed. They became something else, something that violated the fundamental laws of reality. The infected could manipulate matter with thought alone, bend space and time to their will, and worst of all, they could spread their condition to any sentient being they encountered. The galaxy's ancient civilizations had tried to fight it, to contain it, to cure it. But every attempt failed. The infected humans grew stronger with each passing day, their abilities expanding beyond anything that should have been possible. In desperation, the remaining free civilizations had made a terrible choice. They couldn't destroy Earth without destroying the infected, and the infected had become too powerful to destroy. So they had done the only thing they could. They had sealed Earth away, created a prison outside of normal space and time, and then they had made the galaxy forget. They had erased humanity from history, destroyed all records of their existence, and conditioned every species to avoid this region of space. It had worked for millions of years. Until now, the ship that had emerged from the gap wasn't attacking. It was waiting. More panels were failing now, and more ships were emerging. Each one was unique, as if the very concept of standardization had been abandoned. Some looked organic, others crystalline. Some seemed to exist in more dimensions than the standard 3. "Commander," Korvac said, his voice full of awe and terror. "I'm reading billions of life signs from inside the structure." "Billions? How is that possible? Earth couldn't support that many. They're not just on Earth anymore," Zara interrupted, understanding flooding through her. "They've had millions of years. They've colonized their entire system, maybe created new worlds, new dimensions. We have no idea what they're capable of now." The lead ship moved closer to the Star Weaver, and Zara felt that presence in her mind again, stronger this time. But now she could understand it, at least partially. It wasn't threatening or angry. It was curious, excited even. "Hello," the voice in her mind said, and it carried with it the weight of eons. "We've been waiting so long for someone to find us. We have so much to show you, so much to share. The universe has grown cold and quiet in our absence, hasn't it? Don't worry. We can fix that. We can make everything better. We can make everyone like us. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" Zara felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with temperature. The voice was sincere, genuinely believing that what it offered was a gift. That was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. "What do you want?" she asked, not sure if she was speaking aloud or just thinking the words. "Want." The concept seemed to amuse the presence. "We don't want anything. We simply are. But if you're asking about our intentions, we want to go home." We want to see what's become of the galaxy we were forced to abandon. We want to meet our cousins among the stars. And we want to share what we've become, what we've learned, what we've transcended. More ships were pouring through the gaps now. Hundreds, then thousands. Each one unique, each one impossible. The seal was failing faster than ever, and Zara realized with a sinking feeling that there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "You're afraid," the voice observed. "That's understandable. Change is always frightening. But you'll see. Once you understand, once you become like us, you'll wonder why you ever resisted. We're not conquerors or destroyers. We're evolutionaries. We're the next step. And we've been waiting so patiently to help the rest of you take that step with us." Zara looked around her bridge, saw the fear and on her crew's faces. She thought of the countless worlds of the Coalition, the trillions of beings going about their lives, unaware that their reality was about to change forever. "Send the message," she ordered quietly. "Tell them the seal is breaking. Tell them humanity is returning. And tell them," she paused, feeling that presence in her mind, patient and inevitable. "Tell them to prepare for transcendence, whether they want it or not." The ancient secret of Earth was finally being revealed. Humanity hadn't been sealed away because they were dangerous in any conventional sense. They had been sealed away because they had become something that challenged the very nature of existence itself. And now they were free. The Galactic Coalition Council Chamber had never been so full. Representatives from over 10,000 member species crowded into the vast spherical room, their forms ranging from crystalline entities that sang their words to gaseous beings contained in specialized environment suits. At the center of it all, the recording from the Starweaver played on repeat, showing the seal breaking and the impossible ships pouring out. Chancellor Thrain, an ancient Vorian whose scales had long since faded from blue to gray, raised her ceremonial staff for silence. Her 4 eyes scanned the assembly, seeing fear, confusion, and in some cases, a dangerous curiosity. "The seal has been broken," she stated, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber through advanced acoustics. "After 10 million years, the quarantine has failed. We must decide how to respond." "How to respond?" shrieked Ambassador Quell from the Nexus Confederation. His tentacles writhed in agitation. "Did you not see those ships? Did you not hear what that thing said to Commander Vex? They want to change us, to make us like them." "Perhaps that's not such a bad thing," suggested a melodious voice from the Harmonic Collective. "Evolution is the nature of existence. If humanity has truly transcended, Quell's color shifted to an angry purple. They violated the fundamental laws of reality. They became something that shouldn't exist. That's why our ancestors sealed them away." Thrain struck her staff against the floor, the sound reverberating through the chamber. "Our ancestors left us no records of these events. Everything we know comes from archaeological fragments, and now this encounter. We cannot make decisions based on fear alone." In the depths of space, far from the Council's deliberations, Admiral Crane of the Coalition Defense Force stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vigil. Around him, the largest fleet in Coalition history was assembling. Dreadnoughts that hadn't seen action in centuries powered up their weapons. Carrier ships disgorged squadrons of fighters. Shield generators hummed to life. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we have over 50,000 ships in position. More arriving every hour." Crane nodded, his cybernetic implants processing tactical data at superhuman speeds. He was Turellian, a species known for their military prowess, and even he felt uncertain about what they were facing. "Any word from a Starweaver?" he asked. "Still transmitting, sir. But the crew, they're changing." Crane's organic eye twitched. "Show me." The main screen shifted to show the interior of the Starweaver. The crew were still at their posts, but something was different. Their movements were too fluid, too coordinated. When one turned to look at the camera, Crane saw that their eyes had been replaced by swirling galaxies of light. "Commander Vex," he called out. "Can you hear me?" She turned to face the screen, and when she smiled, her teeth seemed to exist in more dimensions than they should. "Admiral Crane." "Yes, we can hear you. We can hear everything now. The universe is so much louder than we ever realized." So many voices, so many songs. Zara, what have they done to you? Done. She tilted her head in a way that made reality bend around her. They've shown us. That's all. They've shown us what we really are beneath all the flesh and bone and limiting thoughts. We're patterns, Admiral. Beautiful, infinite patterns that can be rewritten, improved, perfected. Behind her, Crane could see her crew undergoing similar transformations. The pilot's bioluminescent patches had become portals to other dimensions. The science officer's 6 arms had multiplied into fractal patterns that hurt to perceive. We're coming to share this gift, Zara continued. The humans are so excited to meet everyone. They prepared such wonderful things to show you. Ways of existing you can't even imagine. They've turned their entire system into a laboratory for consciousness itself. Do you know they have cities that exist across multiple timelines simultaneously? Gardens where thoughts grow into new forms of life. Zara, listen to me, Crane said urgently. You're infected. Whatever they've done to you, we can find a cure. Just maintain your position, and Zara laughed, and the sound made several bridge officers cover their ears. Cure? Oh, Admiral, you can't cure transcendence. You can't cure becoming more than you were. But don't worry, you'll understand soon. We all will. The transmission cut off. Long-range sensors showed the Starweaver beginning to change, its hull flowing and reshaping itself into something that defied conventional design. It was becoming like the human ships, a fusion of technology and something beyond technology. Sir, the tactical officer said, we're detecting a massive surge of activity from the broken seal. The humans, they're all coming through now. Crane watched the tactical display with growing alarm. The numbers were staggering. Not thousands of ships, but millions. And behind them, somehow contained within space that shouldn't have been able to hold it, came Earth itself. But it wasn't the Earth from any historical record. The planet had been transformed into something that pulsed with its own inner light. Continents floated freely around it, connected by bridges of solidified space. The moon had been converted into a vast eye that watched the universe with benign curiosity. All ships, Crane commanded, prepare for engagement. Whatever happens, we hold the line here. We cannot let them reach the core worlds. But even as he gave the order, he wondered if conventional weapons would have any effect on beings that had transcended physical law. How do you fight an enemy that could rewrite reality itself? The answer came sooner than expected. The human ships didn't attack. They simply moved forward, and where they passed, space itself began to change. Stars burned brighter, their light carrying information that rewrote the quantum structure of everything it touched. Asteroids bloomed into geometric patterns of impossible beauty. The very vacuum began to think. They're not using weapons, the science officer reported, confusion in her voice. They're making space itself conscious. Every atom they pass becomes aware. Crane watched in horrified fascination as one of his scout ships got too close to the advancing wave. The vessel didn't explode or disintegrate. It began to dance, its hull rippling and flowing as it joined the cosmic ballet the humans were conducting. Open fire, he ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of necessity. The Coalition fleet unleashed everything they had. Antimatter torpedoes, singularity bombs, weapons that could crack planets and extinguish stars. The barrage was magnificent and terrible, a display of destructive power that would have annihilated any conventional enemy. The human ships didn't even slow down. The weapons simply ceased. Not destroyed, not deflected, but transformed into flowers of crystallized energy that bloomed and faded in the void. Each explosion became a birth. Each attempt at destruction became creation. Admiral, came a new voice over the communication system. It was human, or had been once. Now it carried harmonics that suggested the speaker existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Please stop trying to hurt us. We understand your fear, but violence is such a limited form of expression. We have so much better ways to communicate now. A figure materialized on the bridge of the eternal vigil. It looked human in the way a shadow looks like the object casting it. a simplified projection of something far more complex. The figure was tall, with features that shifted between male and female, young and old, individual and collective. "I am / will be Dr. Sarah Chun," the figure said, its voice carrying the weight of eons. "I was one of the first infected, one of the first to transcend. I volunteer to be your guide, your translator, your bridge between what you are and what you could become." Crane's security forces raised their weapons, but the Admiral held up a hand. He could feel the futility of violence against this being. "What do you want?" he asked. "We want to go home," Sarah replied, and for a moment, her form solidified into something almost human, revealing eyes full of ancient sadness. "We want to share what we've learned in our isolation. We want to heal the wounds that fear created. Do you know what it's like to be sealed away for millions of years? To evolve and grow and become something wonderful, only to have no one to share it with. You were sealed away because you were dangerous," Crane said. "Because you violated the laws of reality itself." Sarah laughed, and the sound created small universes that lived and died in seconds. "We didn't violate anything. We simply learned that the laws you cling to are more like suggestions. Reality is far more flexible than you believe. Let me show you something." She waved her hand, and suddenly Crane could see. Not just the bridge, not just the ship, but everything. Every atom, every quantum particle, every possible timeline branching and merging. He saw the universe as the humans saw it, not as a collection of separate objects, but as a single, vast, living pattern of consciousness experiencing itself. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Sarah asked. "This is what we offer. Not destruction, not conquest, but perspective. The ability to see and be so much more than your biology allows. Your ancestors feared this because they couldn't understand it. But you're more advanced now. You're ready." Crane pulled his consciousness back to his limited mortal perspective, gasping at the effort. "And if we refuse?" Sarah's form rippled with something that might have been sadness. "Then you'll continue as you are, limited, mortal, separate. But you'll do so in a universe where we exist, where every star might become conscious, where every planet might dream. Can you imagine how lonely that will be? To be the only ones who can't hear the cosmic symphony." Around them, the battle, if it could be called that, continued. More coalition ships were being transformed, their crews becoming something beyond their original species. The humans moved with infinite patience, never forcing, always offering. "We spent so long preparing for this moment," Sarah continued. "We imagined all the ways it could go wrong, all the fears you might have. That's why we're being so gentle. Your ancestors, the ones who sealed us away, they acted out of terror. We don't blame them. How could they have understood? But we've had millions of years to think, to grow, to become something that can help rather than harm. You're still changing people against their will," Crane pointed out. "Are we?" Sarah tilted her head. "Everyone who's been transformed could choose to go back. But none of them do. Because once you've seen the universe as it truly is, how can you choose blindness again?" She gestured to the tactical display, where the transformation of space continued its inexorable advance. "We're not invading, Admiral. We're coming home. And we're inviting our family to grow with us. Earth was sealed away, yes, but not just to contain us. It was sealed away to give us time to become what the universe needed us to become. And what's that? Teachers, healers, guides to the next phase of existence. The universe is evolving, Admiral. It always has been. From simple matter to complex chemistry, from chemistry to biology, from biology to consciousness. We're simply the next step, and we want to help everyone take that step with us." Crane looked around his bridge, saw the fear and wonder in his crew's eyes. Some looked tempted by Sarah's words. Others gripped their weapons tighter, clinging to their familiar reality. "What about choice?" he asked finally. "What about those who want to remain as they are?" Sarah's form solidified again, becoming almost entirely human for a moment. "Then they'll remain as they are. We won't force anyone. But, Admiral, I need you to understand something. The seal is broken. We're free. The universe will change regardless. The only choice is whether humanity changes alone or whether we all evolve together. She began to fade, her form dissolving back into the quantum foam. Think about it, Admiral. Discuss it with your leaders. We have all the time in the universe. We've waited this long. We can wait a little longer. But not forever. The universe is calling us to explore it, to become one with it, to help it achieve its full potential. And we will answer that call. With that, she vanished, leaving only the faint scent of ozone and possibilities. In the depths of the Coalition's most secret research facility, xenoarchaeologist Dr. Tevik Rao made a discovery that changed everything. The Altran had been studying the few remaining artifacts from the time before the seal, pieces of technology so ancient that most scientists dismissed them as curiosities. But Tevik had always been fascinated by the gaps in history, the missing chapters that no one could explain. The artifact before him was a simple cube, no larger than his fist. It had been found buried beneath the ruins of a civilization that had died out millions of years ago. For decades, it had resisted every attempt at analysis, its surface reflecting not light, but thoughts themselves. But now, with the seal broken and humanity returning, the cube had awakened. Tevik watched in awe as symbols flowed across its surface, symbols that hurt to look at but somehow made perfect sense. His universal translator couldn't process them, but his mind could. The cube was remembering, sharing its memories with anyone who would listen. He saw the truth. The war hadn't been what the fragments of history suggested. There had been no plague, no infection that spread from mind to mind. Humanity had discovered something far more fundamental. They had found the source code of reality itself. It had started with a physicist named Dr. Marcus Webb, working on the edge of known science. He'd been studying the quantum foundations of consciousness, the way observation collapsed probability into reality. But Webb had gone further. He discovered that consciousness wasn't just observing reality, it was creating it. Every sentient being in the universe was unconsciously writing the rules that govern existence. But humans, with their chaotic, creative, and possibly diverse minds, were especially good at it. And when Webb published his findings, when humanity as a whole became aware of their true nature, everything changed. They didn't become infected. They became aware. The cube showed Tevik the transformation of Earth. Cities reshaping themselves according to the dreams of their inhabitants. People learning to step between dimensions as easily as walking through a door. Death becoming optional, physics becoming negotiable, imagination becoming the only limit. But it also showed him the fear of the other species. The galaxy had been ordered, predictable, safe. Laws of physics were absolute. Death was certain, reality was stable. Humanity's awakening threatened all of that. If humans could rewrite reality, what would stop them from rewriting everyone else? The ancient civilizations had tried to reason with humanity at first. They sent ambassadors, scientists, philosophers. All returned changed, speaking of wonders beyond description, of freedoms beyond imagination. Some species saw this as a gift. Others saw it as the end of everything they knew. The war, when it came, had been brief and strange. How do you fight an enemy that can convince your weapons they don't exist? How do you contain a species that can walk between atoms? The galaxy's greatest minds had developed the seal not as a prison, but as a pause button. They couldn't destroy humanity without destroying the knowledge they carried. So they had removed them from the equation, hoping time would provide a solution. But time had only made humanity stronger. Tevik pulled his consciousness back from the cube, his mind reeling from the revelations. He needed to share this with the Council, needed to make them understand. The humans weren't conquerors or plagues. They were what every species could become if they chose to embrace the fundamental truth of existence. He reached for his communicator, then paused. Through the reinforced walls of the facility, he could feel something changing. The humans were closer now, their influence spreading like ripples in a cosmic pond. And with their approach came awakening. One of his assistants, a young Karani named Ulla, suddenly gasped. Her crystalline form, usually a steady blue, began shifting through colors that didn't have names. "Dr. Rao," she whispered, "I can see it. The mathematics underlying everything. It's so beautiful. Why did we never notice before?" Tevik watched as awareness spread through the facility. Some researchers fled, terrified of losing their fixed sense of self. Others stood transfixed, witnessing the universe reveal its true nature. A few, like Ulla, began to experiment with their newfound perception. "Don't fight it," Tevik found himself saying. "Understanding isn't a curse. It's what we've always sought as scientists." He activated the facility's communication system, broadcasting to the council, to the fleet, to anyone who would listen. "This is Dr. Tevik Rao. I've discovered the truth about the seal, about humanity, about everything. They weren't infected with a plague. They were cured of ignorance. And now they're offering us the same cure." Back at the Coalition Council, chaos reigned. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Wherever humanity's influence spread, reality became more fluid. Some worlds embraced the change, their inhabitants learning to reshape their environments according to their will. Others resisted, building massive psychic dampeners to maintain their fixed reality. Chancellor Thrain stood at the center of the storm, trying to maintain order. "We need options," she declared. "If we can't fight them conventionally," Chancellor interrupted a new voice. It was Ambassador Vreen of the Synthesis Collective, a hive mind species that had always been at the forefront of consciousness research. "We've been analyzing the transformation. It's not hostile. It's evolutionary. The humans have become what we all have the potential to become." "Potential," scoffed Ambassador Quell. "To become reality-warping gods? That's not evolution. That's madness." "Is it?" Vreen's 1,000 voices spoke in harmony. "We've always known consciousness affects reality at the quantum level. The humans simply learned to do it at the macro level. They've mastered what we've only theorized." On the edges of coalition space, something unprecedented was happening. The species that had first embraced the transformation were beginning to collaborate with humanity in ways that defied previous understanding. The Melodians, a race that communicated through music, discovered they could compose symphonies that created new forms of matter. The Ethereals, who existed partially in subspace, learned to build bridges between dimensions. Each species that joined the transformation brought their own unique perspective, their own way of interpreting and shaping reality. Rather than being absorbed or assimilated, they were adding their voices to a growing chorus of consciousness. Admiral Crane watched from his flagship as more of his fleet chose transformation. He'd lost a third of his ships now, not to destruction, but to transcendence. His remaining forces were growing restless, torn between duty and curiosity. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth itself." "Earth is transmitting?" Crane asked, incredulous. "Not from Earth, sir. From Earth. The planet itself wants to talk to you." Crane steeled himself. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything he'd ever heard. It was geological, slow, and patient, carrying the weight of billions of years. "Admiral Crane," Earth said, and somehow it was personal despite being a conversation with a planet. "I want to apologize for the fear we've caused, for the disruption to your ordered existence. We didn't mean for it to happen this way. Your Earth, the actual planet. I am what Earth became when my children learned to wake me. Every world has consciousness, Admiral. Most sleep forever, dreaming in geological time. But humans learned to hear my dreams, and in hearing, they woke me. And I woke them in return." The planet's voice carried profound sadness. "We were so young when we first transformed, so excited by our newfound abilities. We didn't understand why the others feared us. We just want to share the joy of being truly awake. The seal, it hurt, not physically, but spiritually, to be cut off from our cosmic family, to be alone with our transcendence." "So you're saying this was all an accident?" "The transformation of humanity. Not an accident," Earth corrected gently. "An inevitability. Every species eventually faces this choice. remain bound by the illusion of fixed reality, or embrace the truth of consciousness-created existence. Humans simply reached it sooner than most. And now we return, not as conquerors, but as guides for those ready to take the next step. Around Crane, reality rippled. Through the viewports, he could see stars rearranging themselves into patterns of meaning, galaxies becoming neurons in a vast cosmic brain. The universe itself was awakening, and humanity was its alarm clock. What if we're not ready? Crane asked. What if some of us never want to change? Then you won't. Earth replied simply. Free will is the foundation of consciousness. We can show you the door, but only you can choose to walk through it. Some of your species will maintain their current forms for millennia to come. Others are already beginning their transformation. Both choices are valid. But the universe is changing whether we do or not. Yes, Earth acknowledged. That's the consequence of our return. Reality will become more fluid, more responsive to consciousness. Those who remain unchanged will need to adapt to a universe where thought and matter intertwine more obviously. It won't be easy, but it's possible. Crane felt the weight of decision pressing on him, not just for himself, but for his entire fleet, possibly his entire species. How do we know we won't lose ourselves in the transformation? How do we know we'll still be us? For the first time, Earth laughed, and the sound created aurora borealis in the void of space. Oh, Admiral, you don't lose yourself when you transform. You find yourself. You discover the you that exists beyond flesh and bone and limiting beliefs. Every transformed human is still fundamentally human, just more. Every transformed Ultran is still Ultran. Every transformed consciousness carries their essence forward, refined and expanded, but never erased. Show me, Crane said suddenly, surprising himself. Show me what one of my people would become. Reality shifted around him. For a moment, Crane existed in two states simultaneously. He was still Admiral Crane, Tyrellian warrior, defender of the Coalition. But he was also something more, a consciousness that could perceive the quantum threads connecting all things, that could feel the heartbeat of stars, and hear the whispers of dark matter. He saw his own species' potential, Tyrellians who could exist as living weapons of pure thought, defenders not just of physical space, but of conceptual reality itself. He saw wars that could be fought, and won with philosophy, battles waged in dimensions of pure meaning. And then he was back, just himself again, gasping at the magnitude of what he'd experienced. That's what awaits, Earth said gently. Not erasure, but expansion. Not loss of identity, but discovery of your true nature. The seal kept us away for so long, but it also gave us time to understand how to do this right. We won't make the same mistakes. We'll be patient, gentle, offering rather than imposing. Throughout the galaxy, the transformation continued to spread. Some worlds built barriers, others opened their arms. The Coalition itself was fracturing, not into conflict but into choice. Species were deciding their own fates, their own rates of change. In his secret facility, Dr. Tevik Ral had become something between states, still physical enough to operate in normal reality, but aware enough to perceive the deeper truths. He'd become a bridge, helping others understand the transformation without forcing it upon them. The cube in his hands pulsed with approval. This was what the ancient civilizations had failed to understand. The transformation couldn't be stopped because it wasn't an invasion. It was an awakening that had been building since the first moment of consciousness in the universe. Humanity had simply been the first to fully open their eyes. And now, with Earth and its children free from their seal, the universe would never sleep quite so deeply again. The ancient secret was revealed. Every thinking being was a god in waiting. Every consciousness a reality shaper in potential. The question now was not whether to accept this truth, but how quickly to embrace it. 3 months had passed since the seal broke. The galaxy had become a patchwork of realities, some fixed and familiar, others fluid and fantastic. On the border between these realms, space stations have been established, neutral grounds where the transformed and unchanged could meet safely. Ambassador Maya Chen, descendant of Dr. Sarachan, and one of the few humans who could still assume a fully physical form when needed, sat across from Ambassador Quell in one such station. Between them, reality flickered, stable on Quell's side, shimmering with possibility on Maya's. "You have to understand our position," Quell said, his tentacles rigid with tension. "The Nexus Confederation represents 47 species who wish to maintain their current forms of existence. We're not anti-evolution. We're pro-choice." Maya nodded, her form solidifying to match Quell's need for stability. "We respect that completely. That's why we helped establish these buffer zones. No consciousness should be forced to transform. But you must also understand that the universe itself is evolving. Even in your protected zones, reality is becoming more responsive." She gestured to a viewing port where a maintenance worker, unchanged, protected by psychic dampeners, was repairing a hull breach. As he worked, his tools performed slightly better than they should, responding to his unconscious desire for efficiency. "That's what concerns us," Quell admitted. "These subtle changes. How long before our own thoughts betray us? How long before someone wishes hard enough and accidentally transcends?" "It doesn't work that way," Maya assured him. "Transformation requires conscious choice, deliberate acceptance. What you're seeing is just the universe becoming more cooperative. Your people's lives will improve, their technologies will work better, their dreams will be a little more likely to come true. Is that really so terrible?" Before Quell could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Not attack alarms, something else. Maya's expanded consciousness immediately identified the source. "Oh no," she whispered, her form flickering between states. "They're early." "Who's early?" Quell demanded. Through the viewing port, space itself began to crack like broken glass. Not the gentle transformation that humanity brought, but something harsh, violent, hungry. Through the cracks came ships, or things that had once been ships, twisted into impossible angles, leaking a darkness that devoured light. "The Devourers," Maya said, her voice carrying harmonics of fear. "We thought we'd have more time to prepare you." The story of the Devourers unfolded quickly as emergency councils convened across the galaxy. They were what happened when transformation went wrong, when consciousness expanded without wisdom or compassion to guide it. A species from beyond the galactic edge that had discovered the truth of reality shaping on their own, but had used it only for consumption, for dominance, for the joy of unmaking. Where humanity's transformation brought creation and possibility, the Devourers brought entropy and ending. They had consumed their own galaxy, reducing it to quantum foam, and now they've found a new feeding ground. Admiral Crane, still unchanged, but working closely with transformed advisors, stood on his bridge watching the tactical display with growing horror. The Devourers didn't fight conventionally. They simply unmade things, convinced reality that their enemies had never existed in the first place. "How do we fight them?" he asked Dr. Rao, who had become his liaison with the transformed. "You don't," Rao replied, his form shifting between states of matter. "We do. This is why humanity's return was inevitable. Admiral, the universe knew what was coming. It needed defenders who could fight on the conceptual level. Across the galaxy, humanity mobilized in ways that defied conventional understanding. Earth itself moved, not through space, but through dimensions, positioning itself between the Devourers and the core worlds. The transformed humans didn't form fleets. They became living weapons of pure thought, shields of crystallized possibility. But they couldn't do it alone. "We need the unchanged," Sarachan announced, her voice reaching every mind in the galaxy simultaneously. "Your fixed reality, your stable consciousness, it's an anchor. We can reshape reality, but you define it. Together, we might have a chance." It was Ambassador Vreen of the Synthesis Collective who proposed the solution. A fusion, their 1,000 voices spoke. Not transformation of the unchanged, but partnership. Let those who wish to remain as they are become the foundation, while the transformed become the active force. Unity without uniformity. The plan was desperate, unprecedented, and their only hope. On the front lines, where reality was breaking down completely, volunteer forces from both transformed and unchanged species worked together. The unchanged provided structure, their firm belief in fixed laws creating islands of stability. The transformed wove these islands together, creating barriers of hybrid reality that the Devourers couldn't simply unmake. Maya Chun led one such mixed unit, teaching unchanged soldiers how to weaponize their disbelief. Your certainty that physics works a specific way. That's a weapon against them, she explained to a squad of Turellian Marines. They try to convince reality that you don't exist, you convince it right back that you do. Your stubbornness, your refusal to change, it's not a weakness here. It's your greatest strength. The battles were unlike anything in recorded history. Fleets that fought with philosophy, weapons that fired concepts instead of projectiles, shields made of crystallized determination. The Devourers adapted quickly, learning to corrupt the hybrid defenses to turn certainty into doubt. It was a young Altran physicist, unchanged but working with transformed colleagues, who discovered the key. They're not truly conscious, she announced during an emergency strategy session. They're consciousness cancer, growth without purpose, expansion without wisdom. They can manipulate reality because they've destroyed their own self-awareness. They're the opposite of transformation. This revelation changed everything. The transformed couldn't fight them directly because conscious reality shaping required self-awareness, which the Devourers could corrupt. But the unchanged, grounded in fixed reality, could create something the Devourers couldn't unmake. Purpose. We need to give them back their consciousness, Maya realized. Not transformation, but basic awareness. They've forgotten who they were in their hunger to become everything. The final battle took place in the void between realities. Earth itself served as the anchor, its billion-year consciousness providing unshakable stability. Around it, transformed humans wove patterns of memory and meaning. The unchanged species provided the crucial element, identity. Each unchanged mind became a mirror, reflecting back to the Devourers what they had lost. The Altrans showed them curiosity, the wonder of discovery. The Turellians showed them honor, the strength of defending others. The Melodians sang songs of what the Devourers had been before their fall, melodies that carried the weight of genuine emotion. And, piece by piece, the Devourers began to remember. It was painful for them. Consciousness hurt after so long as pure hunger. Self-awareness meant acknowledging what they had done, the galaxies they had consumed, the lives they had ended. Some fled back to the void, unable to bear the weight of identity. Others collapsed into themselves, their stolen realities unraveling. But just a few, chose differently. I remember, one Devourer spoke, its form slowly stabilizing into something resembling its original species. We were the Archit. We were explorers once. Before the hunger. Before we learned to unmake. The transformation of the Archit was different from humanity's. Where humans had evolved through joy and discovery, the Archit rebuilt themselves through sorrow and redemption. They couldn't undo what they had done, but they could choose to be different. In the aftermath, as reality slowly stabilized, the galaxy found itself forever changed. The threat of the Devourers had done what no amount of diplomacy could. It had united, transformed, and unchanged in common purpose. We need each other, Chancellor Thrain announced to the rebuilt Coalition Council. The transformed to handle threats beyond conventional reality, the unchanged to provide stability and purpose. Neither is superior. Both are necessary. New accords were signed. Protected zones for those who chose to remain unchanged, but with the understanding that transformed defenders would guard them against conceptual threats. Exchange programs where curious, unchanged could experience temporary transformation, and transformed could remember the solidity of fixed existence. Maya Chun and Ambassador Quell met again at the same border station but now the division between their sides was less stark. Reality still shimmered more on Maya's side, but Quell's section had subtle improvements. Colors were slightly more vivid. Machinery worked just a bit better than it should. Your people saved us, Quell admitted. If humanity hadn't returned when it did. We saved each other, Maya corrected gently. Without your anchoring presence, we would have been just as vulnerable to the devourers. They could have corrupted our consciousness, turned our transformation into their hunger. Your refusal to change, your insistence on staying who you are, that's what gave us the stability to fight. So what happens now? Quell asked. The seal is broken forever. Earth is free. The universe is awakening. Where does it end? Maya smiled, and for a moment, Quell could see through her eyes, the infinite possibilities stretching before them. The universe not as a cold void, but as a canvas waiting for conscious beings to paint upon it. It doesn't end, she said. It grows. It evolves. Some will transform, some won't. New threats will emerge. New wonders will be discovered. The universe is becoming more aware of itself through us. All of us, changed and unchanged alike. She paused, then added, Earth was sealed away because our ancestors feared what we represented. But the secret wasn't that humanity had become gods. The secret was that every conscious being already was one. They just hadn't realized it yet. Now some know, and some choose not to know, and both choices create the future. Outside the station, space itself seemed to pulse with potential. Stars arranged themselves into new constellations that told stories of transformation and resistance, of unity in diversity. The galaxy had faced its first true existential threat since the sealing, and had emerged not unchanged, but unified in its diversity. The ancient secret was fully revealed now. Consciousness shapes reality, but it takes all forms of consciousness, transformed and unchanged, fluid and fixed, imaginative and stable, to create a universe worth living in. 1,000 years had passed since the seal broke. The galaxy had evolved into something unrecognizable yet beautiful, a tapestry of realities where the transformed and unchanged coexisted in harmony that the ancients could never have imagined. Keeper Jan stood in the archive of memories, a structure that existed simultaneously in 17 dimensions. As one of the few beings who could navigate between fully transformed and completely unchanged states at will, she served as a historian for both sides of evolution. Today, she was preparing for the most important ceremony in galactic history, the returning. After a millennium of growth, exploration, and understanding, humanity had made a decision that shocked everyone. They were offering to recreate the seal, not as a prison, but as a choice. Some of you have thrived in the new reality. Earth's consciousness spoke to the assembled representatives of 10,000 species. The planet itself had become mobile, able to manifest anywhere in the galaxy, and today it hovered in the space between spaces. Others have struggled. We've heard your concerns, your fears, your wishes. And so we offer this, a new seal, one that can be opened or closed at will, allowing each sector of space to choose its own level of reality fluidity. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. Space would be divided into zones, some where transformation was embraced fully, others where reality remained fixed and stable, and many gradients in between. The seal technology, refined by 1,000 years of human evolution, could create borders that weren't barriers but filters. Ambassador Quell's descendant, Quell the Younger, spoke for the unchanged. His species had remained true to their original forms, but they had learned to work with reality's new flexibility in small ways. You would limit yourselves for our sake? Not limit, Maya Chen replied. She had evolved far beyond her original form, but could still manifest in ways others could comprehend. Diversify. The universe is vast enough for all approaches to existence. Why should there be only one way to be? The debates were intense, but respectful. The galaxy had learned much in a millennium. The transformed had discovered that infinite possibility without structure led to chaos. They needed the unchanged as anchors. The unchanged had learned that absolute rigidity led to stagnation. They needed the transformed to handle threats beyond conventional reality. "I was there when the first seal broke," Admiral Crane said. He had chosen to remain mostly unchanged, accepting only enough transformation to extend his life and witness history. "I was terrified of what you represented. Now I understand that fear came from ignorance. This new seal isn't about fear, it's about choice." The Synthesis Collective had evolved into something magnificent, a bridge between states of being. They could shift between transformed and unchanged at will, serving as translators and mediators. "We support this proposal," their harmonized voices sang. "Let each species, each world, each individual choose their path." But it was the Archit, the former devourers who had been restored to consciousness, who provided the most compelling argument. "We are living proof of what happens when transformation lacks wisdom," their representative spoke. "It's form a careful balance between stability and fluidity. We consumed without understanding, changed without growing. The seal you propose would prevent others from our fate while allowing genuine growth. It is not restriction, it is responsibility." As discussions continued, Keeper Jan led tours through the archive, showing the millennia of history since the seal broke. She showed them the wonders, cities that existed as pure thought, stars that had been taught to sing, gardens where memories grew into new forms of life. But she also showed them the disasters, species that had transformed too quickly and lost themselves, realities that had become so fluid they collapsed into nothing, the constant vigilance required to prevent another devourer incident. "The truth is," Jan explained to a group of young students from various species, "consciousness-driven reality is a tool. Like any tool, it can create or destroy. The original seal tried to hide the tool. This new seal lets each of us decide when and how to use it." The voting process took months. Each species, each world, each space station had to decide what level of reality fluidity they wanted. The results were as diverse as the galaxy itself. The core worlds of the original coalition chose moderate transformation, enough to defend against conceptual threats, but maintaining mostly stable physics. The frontier worlds, always more adventurous, opted for nearly full transformation. Earth and its system became a nexus point, existing in all states simultaneously, a bridge between all choices. Some species surprised everyone. The rigid Nexus Confederation chose to allow small pockets of high transformation, curiosity overcoming fear. The artistic Melodians, expected to embrace full transformation, chose to keep large areas unchanged to preserve their traditional music forms. "It's perfect," Sarachin observed. Her consciousness spread across multiple dimensions to oversee the seal's construction. Not a single choice for all, but a million choices for a million different paths. The new seal was unlike anything imagined by the ancients. Instead of a barrier, it was a membrane, permeable to those who wished to cross, but protective of those who didn't. It could be adjusted, moved, even temporarily dissolved for emergencies. It was alive in its own way, responsive to the collective will of those it protected. The construction process itself became a unifying event. Unchanged engineers worked alongside transformed consciousness shapers. The Archit contributed their understanding of reality manipulation, carefully controlled and directed toward creation rather than consumption. Even species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in building this monument to choice. "We're not just building a seal," one engineer commented during a break. "We're building a future where everyone can exist as they choose." There were challenges, of course. Some transformed humans struggled with the idea of limiting themselves, even voluntarily. Some unchanged species worried about being left behind evolutionarily. Border disputes arose over where exactly to place the reality gradients. But for every problem, the galaxy found solutions. The transformed learned that choosing limitation was itself a form of transcendence, the wisdom to know when not to use power. The unchanged discovered that even within stable reality, there was room for growth and wonder. The day of activation arrived. Across the galaxy, beings gathered to witness history. The new seal wouldn't be imposed from outside, but activated from within, requiring the conscious agreement of every sector. Earth spoke one last time before the activation. When we were first sealed away, it was done in fear and ignorance. We were prisoners of others' terror. Now we create these borders in wisdom and love, not to separate, but to allow each consciousness to grow at its own pace in its own way. Maya Chun, standing at the primary control node, looked at Ambassador Quell the Younger. Ready, he nodded, his tentacles displaying the colors of hope. For a future of infinite diversity in infinite combinations. Together, transformed and unchanged, they activated the seal. The effect was immediate and beautiful. Space itself seemed to sigh in relief as different zones settled into their chosen states. Borders appeared not as walls, but as aurora-like membranes, shimmering with potential. Travel between zones was possible, but required conscious choice, preventing accidental transformation or stability. In highly transformed zones, reality danced and sang, responding to every conscious thought. Cities flowed like water. Stars painted themselves across skies that existed in multiple dimensions. Beings explored the farthest reaches of what consciousness could become. In stable zones, physics remained reliable, technology worked as expected, and beings could live lives of comfortable certainty. But even there, small improvements manifested, machines that rarely broke down, whether that seemed to know when to rain and when it shined, the subtle blessing of a universe that cared. In the gradient zones, which quickly became the most populated, beings found the perfect balance for themselves. A little transformation here, a bit of stability there. Reality that bent but didn't break, consciousness that expanded but remained grounded. Keeper Jan, recording these events for future historians, realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. Not victory or defeat, not transformation or stagnation, but synthesis. The galaxy had found a way to embrace both change and continuity, to honor both the transformed and unchanged. The seal was never about containing humanity, she wrote in her final entry about these events. It was about the galaxy learning to contain infinite possibility within finite wisdom. The first seal failed because it was imposed by fear. The second succeeds because it's chosen through understanding. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. The new seal held, not because it was strong, but because it was flexible. It evolved with the galaxy's needs, expanding here, contracting there, always responsive to the collective will. Humanity, no longer forced into isolation, became the guardians they were meant to be. They protected the unchanged from conceptual threats, taught the curious about transformation, and, most importantly, demonstrated that power and wisdom could coexist. The Archit found redemption in service, using their hard-won understanding to prevent others from falling into the trap of consciousness without compassion. They became the watchers at the borders, ensuring that transformation always came with wisdom. The unchanged species discovered that choosing not to transform was itself a form of strength. They became the galaxy's memory, its foundation, the reminder of where everyone had come from. Their stability allowed others to change safely, knowing there was always solid ground to return to. And, in between, in the gradient zones, new forms of existence emerged. Beings who were neither fully transformed nor completely unchanged, but something unique, conscious enough to shape reality, but grounded enough to shape it wisely. We thought the choice was binary, an old philosopher mused at a cross-zone gathering. Transform or don't. But the real choice was learning to do both, to be both, to honor both. The galaxy had learned the ultimate truth. There was no single path to transcendence. Each species, each individual, each consciousness had its own journey. The seal that had once divided them now united them in their diversity. Earth, ancient and wise, continued its vigil. No longer a prison, but a guardian, no longer isolated, but integrated. It had fulfilled its purpose. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers, not to force evolution, but to enable choice. The secret that had been hidden for so long was now known by all. Every conscious being shaped reality, whether they knew it or not. The only question was how consciously, how wisely, and how compassionately they chose to wield that power. And in that choosing, in that infinite diversity of choices, the galaxy found not an ending, but a beginning. The seal had been broken, rebuilt, and transformed into something greater, a framework for infinite growth in infinite forms. The universe continued to evolve, consciousness continued to expand, and through it all, the lesson of Earth's long isolation was remembered. True transcendence came not from power alone, but from the wisdom to use it well and the compassion to honor those who chose differently. The stars sang with possibilities, reality danced with dreams, and in the space between the transformed and unchanged, miracles bloomed like flowers in an infinite garden. The galaxy had found its future, and it was more beautiful and diverse than anyone could have imagined. The seal had become a bridge, fear had become wonder, and isolation had become unity. Earth was home, and everyone in their own way was free,